Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on the skills gap in Nebraska regions, which is being presented by the UNL Bureau of Business Research, as well as the Nebraska Department of Labor. My name is Eric Thompson. I'm the director of the Bureau of Business Research, and I'll be giving the webinar here today along with Dillon Cornett, who is a research analyst with labor market information within the Nebraska Department of Labor. We're going to be summarizing results of a large research project which the Nebraska Department of Labor has been conducting, in part with the assistance of the Bureau of Business Research. Our main presentation today will be a PowerPoint. However, after the PowerPoint presentation is over, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, any follow-up information that you'd like from Dillon or I. Before we get started, I want to point out a few features of our webinar. First of all, there's a bar that should be at the bottom of your screen where you have the option of pressing a chat window, which allows you to chat during the webinar with other participants. And we welcome you to do that as it's useful to you. Another feature we have is a question and answer window. And at any point during the webinar, you're free to go ahead and enter a question, or at the end of the webinar you can ask a question, and when the webinar is complete, Dillon and I will be answering those follow-up questions as I indicated earlier. Last feature of our webinars, we'll be asking 2 poll questions of webinar participants to get your opinion or expectations on an important topic related to Nebraska and its labor markets, and then a little bit later we'll be presenting the results related to that poll question. So with all that said, I'll just give you a brief outline of the labor availability study that the Nebraska Department of Labor collects each year for regions of the state. They develop a labor availability report, a hiring and training needs report, and then the Bureau of Business Research participates by developing a skills gap report. But I'll turn it over to Dillon now and let him give you a lot more detail about the Department of Labor's efforts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thompson, and I'm happy to be here to share some information about our labor availability study. First, I'd like to let you know we do have a landing page where you can find some more information and links to our publications at dol.nebraska.gov/LAS. As Dr. Thompson said, the study includes 3 reports per region: a labor availability report based on data received from individuals, a hiring and training needs report based on data received from employers, and a skills gap report that utilizes both of these data sets and secondary sources. Now, this study is a joint project between the Department of Labor and the Department of Economic Development here in Nebraska, and we also partner with UNL departments and local economic developers. The Bureau of Sociological Research assists the Department of Labor with sampling, mailing, data entry, and data cleaning of the household survey. And as Dr. Thompson mentioned, the Bureau of Business Research produces a skills gap report for each region where a household and a business report is completed as well. Now, here's a map of some recent survey areas. All of these areas are based on commuting patterns, so we ask the question, for a particular city, where do workers live who work in a particular city? On the left side, you can see an orange area around the city of Sydney. This was an area that we added in this last year due to community uncertainty and potential layoffs. And I just want to mention that local entities can participate in the study. If they'd like to get in the cycle, provide funding, just let us know. And in 2019, we'll be producing reports based on a Valentine survey in the green area and an O'Neill study in the orange area. We'll also be producing a statewide report based on data we've collected over the past few years. And we may be doing a South Sioux City area if a collaboration with Iowa is achieved. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the sampling methodology for both surveys. The Bureau of Sociological Research, once they receive the zip codes we'd like to sample and the population of each, They receive a sample of household addresses and they conduct the survey in those areas. The business survey is conducted by the Department of Labor, and we survey all private businesses in a survey area that employ a certain number of workers, and this threshold is larger for higher populated areas such as Omaha and Lincoln. In the bottom of your screen there, you can see a table showing response rates. Business survey was not completed in Sydney. That was just a household survey based on local concerns. The labor availability report, based on data received from individuals, is mostly focused on two groups of people, potential job seekers and active job seekers. To be categorized as a potential job seeker, a respondent must answer yes or maybe to the question, are you likely to enter the workforce in the next year if a suitable job is available? And that's for non-employed workers. If they stated they were employed, we ask, are you likely to change jobs? And then active job seekers are a subset of those potential job seekers who respond yes to the question, are you actively seeking a new job? Here's a few summary statistics about potential job seekers and active job seekers in some of the areas we surveyed in the last year. On the top row, you can see the survey area, and the second row is report city. So if we just look at the column of Sydney, we found there were 41% of respondents who indicated they were potential job seekers, and 38% of those folks said they were actively searching for a job. And using 2010 census population statistics, we can estimate a number of potential job seekers and active job seekers in a particular area. And this is a useful economic developer tool to show that there are workers available in an area if a suitable job is available. Here are some more summary statistics about potential job seekers. If we look in the Sydney column again, you can see that we also ask respondents what their minimum pay they would require to change jobs would be, and we calculate wage responses and salary responses separately. We also ask employment status and education attainment. And as you can see in the Omaha and Lincoln area, over half of the respondents who are potential job seekers hold a bachelor's degree. Oh, and this is an important tool, this minimum pay required to change jobs for economic developers as well. This can show potential employers what their pay ranges may be for a particular area. So let's have our first poll question. And this is about the business data that we'll get to here in a few slides. First question is, what percentage of businesses say that difficulty finding labor would be a major barrier to expansion? The first option is 20% to 39%, 40 to 59%, and 60 to 79%. And we will look at those results in a few slides once we get to the business data. We also ask respondents about important factors to them when choosing or considering a new job. Often salary and insurance benefits are among the top most important factors to potential job seekers. But there are also other factors like work schedule that fits my needs, use skills you have. They're also near the top of the important factors graph. And also, if you look towards the bottom, there are a portion of potential job seekers who do find accessible childcare or tuition reimbursement to be very important or important. We also ask potential job seekers about obstacles that may prevent them from changing or re-entering the workforce in the next year. And this is an example of the Omaha area report. And as you can see, the top four options are inadequate pay offered, lack of job opportunities in the area, inadequate benefits, and inadequate hours offered. And these four options are often the top in each area, but there are also obstacles that potential job seekers perceive, such as lack of training and lack of education. And looking at this at a potential employer perspective, providing training or education may increase the possible applicant pool. So now let's move into the hiring and training needs report. This is a chart showing the profile of responding businesses for the 5 report cities we conducted this year. And it shows the percentage of businesses with small, medium, and large number of employees, and goods and service producing employers who responded to the survey. We were most interested in this business survey to hear from employers who are actively hiring, and statewide the percentage of goods and service producing businesses are 15% goods producing and 85% service producing. So let's have a look at those first poll results. All right, we can see that 29% of you said 20 to 39%. Also, 29% responded 40 to 59%. And the majority of you said 60 to 79% of businesses said that difficulty finding labor would be a major barrier to expansion. So let's look at the study results. So we asked employers to consider expansion at their location, and if issues with labor availability, such as difficulty finding workers, would be present. As you can see in this graph, in each area from Columbus to Lincoln, the greatest percentage of employers responded that yes, issues with labor availability, such as difficulty finding workers, would be present. And those of you who said 40 to 59% were correct. However, in Omaha and Lincoln, the percentage of employers who responded yes was smaller than in the Northeast area. So let's have another poll question. What is the most common reason that employers say it is difficult to hire? Lack of experience, lack of occupation skills, or not enough applicants? And we'll look at those results in a few slides. So in the hiring and training needs report, we ask businesses to provide 3 occupations that they recently hired or have tried to hire. And we ask them questions about those occupations, such as, is it difficult to find workers for this occupation? So in the top row, you can see the areas. In the first row, or the second row, is all responding businesses. So every business that was surveyed in Columbus, and 81% of those folks said it was difficult to find workers for the occupations that they hire. And we can break this question down into industry and occupation. So staying in that Columbus column, we can see that greater than the average of all businesses, construction businesses in Columbus, 89% of those said it was difficult to find workers that they hire. And we can also break this down by occupation, as I said. Just a quick point about occupations and industries. Many different occupations can work in a particular industry. So let's look at this Columbus column again. In the third row down, for sales occupations, greater than the average of 81%, 87.9% of employers who hire workers for sales occupations say it's difficult to find those workers. So let's have a look at those second poll results. Again, that was, what is the most common reason that employers say it's difficult to hire? Looks like 0% said lack of experience, 64% of you said lack of occupation skills, and 36% of you said not enough applicants. Here's an example of a graph from the Omaha area study. And after we ask employers whether or not it's difficult to hire occupations, we ask them why, what are the reasons, and we give them this list. In every area, the top answer is always not enough applicants. As you can see here in Omaha, 48% of employers who found it difficult to hire their occupation said it was due to not receiving enough applicants, but also lack of work experience and lack of occupation-specific skills. And this ties into the perceptions of potential job seekers and their obstacles to changing and reentering the workforce. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Thompson.
Okay, thank you, Dillon. The Bureau of Business Research takes the results of the labor availability study for each region, the hiring and training needs study for each region, as well as some other secondary data about those regional economies. And we use that to develop a skills gap report in each case. So those 5 regions that Dillon pointed out for last year, we had developed a skills gap report in each of those regions: Columbus, Norfolk, Fremont, Omaha area, and Lincoln area. So I want to talk to you a little bit about those skills gap reports. Our goal is to look at particular occupations and identify those occupations where there's the most evidence of a skills gap being present, occupations where there's a higher than average share of employers suggesting it's difficult to hire, where there seems to be a persistent ongoing gap of accessible skilled workers entering that occupation compared to the annual need of job openings, and where we can sort of logically tie that occupation to one or more types of skills gaps. So let me start with that. What are the different potential types or sources of skills gaps in the economy? Well, the first, and this is one we certainly spend a lot of time talking about in the business and economic news, is structural change. So structural change refers to larger economic phenomenon, the adoption of new technologies, sometimes globalization, other factors which influence and change the types of occupations that are in demand in the economy over time. New technology has certainly increased the demand for several types of, or many types of new occupations, people who are skilled at utilizing that new technology. And it's also led to the destruction of job opportunities in other types of routine occupations where it's been possible to submit or substitute technology for workers. So structural change certainly is a factor that can cause a mismatch, a skill gap, if you will, between the skills of the workforce and the skills needed in the jobs which are available. But that's not the only type of skills gap that can be found in the economy or source of skills gap. Education and training programs can be another source of the skills gap. Can these programs change as quickly as the economy? Can education training programs change to meet the rapidly changing needs of businesses and workers? And are enough students attracted to the education and training programs, the specific programs that'll help them into rapidly growing occupations? So that's another factor that needs to be considered. A third factor is just the general appeal of certain occupations. Because of cultural changes in relative wages, and other factors, there can over time be a decline in the appeal of certain occupations and challenges in attracting enough new young people to want to enter those occupations. And if that occurs, then in those occupations we may see a persistent gap between the number of job openings and the number of young people that want to move into those areas. Taxes on middle-class workers can be another key factor. Gaining new skills is often what helps someone join the middle class. And if marginal tax rates on income, sales, property at the federal, state, and local level are high on middle-income workers, that can influence whether they're willing to make an investment in time and real dollar costs in gaining new skills. If those taxes are low, then workers would get to keep most of the new income they earn from their investment in skill. If those tax rates are high, then workers will be able to keep less of that income. So obviously the level of taxes on middle income workers can have a direct effect on the rate of skill formation. The social safety net has a similar effect. Uh, while low income workers often don't pay a lot of income taxes, they certainly pay other taxes such as sales taxes, directly pay property taxes, or pay it indirectly through the rent payments. But it is true that the income tax payments are often smaller. On the other hand, if low income workers raise their skill or work more and earn a higher income, they may lose some of the benefits of the social safety net. In other words, they face a very high marginal income tax rate in terms of losing social safety program support as they upgrade their skills. So that can be another factor that discourages skill formation. Another factor is what I'm calling career destruction. Um, these are behaviors that may cause some skilled workers to lose the ability to work in the occupations they've prepared for. So, for example, if a worker was hopping jobs quite frequently, making a lot of lateral moves, some potential employers might see that as a lack of ability to get along with people at work, or a negative signal in terms of their own hiring decision, and those workers may not be able to do the type of work they've trained for in the labor market. Obviously, employers can also lose interest in hiring workers who are not able to pass various types of background checks. So those sorts of career destruction behaviors also can cause a skill gap in the economy, where people have skills, but employers are still not willing to hire them. And then, of course, there's just net out migration, where a lot of young people are being prepared for skilled occupations, but they end up migrating out of the state and creating a remaining skills gap here in Nebraska. So we tried to look at some key high skill occupations in Nebraska and identify whether a skills gap was present, and think about what the source of that skills gap might be. Before I talk about that, I'm just going to briefly describe this slide, which shows the significant gaps that exist in some parts of our state between the number of net job openings each year and the number of new entrants into the labor market. We can see that's particularly pronounced among the Columbus and Norfolk areas. And I think if we look over the whole span of our studies in a number of the micropolitan and rural areas of the state, you can see in Columbus and Norfolk, due to people retiring, turnover, as well as net job growth, there's nearly 1,200 openings a year in both Columbus and Norfolk, but there's between 600 and 700 people entering the workforce in those communities each year. So there's not just a skills gap, but just a lack of workers compared to the openings that are available. You can see in Fremont, there's actually more new entrants available than openings. And of course, Fremont benefits from its proximity to the Omaha area labor market. Lincoln has a bit of a surplus. Obviously, Lincoln has a concentration of universities and colleges relative to the size of the community. And Omaha does also have a gap between openings and entrants, but in a percentage terms, it's not as severe as we saw in Columbus and Norfolk. The point about career destruction is it may be making these gaps even worse. You can see that about 40% of employers in the various communities indicate that it's difficult to hire because applicants have a poor work history. It's also true that 15 to 25%, depending on the community, indicate that it's difficult to hire because workers have a background check, difficulty passing a background check. So these types of career destructions are making our balance between net openings and entrances even more challenging. But career destruction is just one of the sources of the skills gap. Let's look at some of the others. I have some good examples here. For example, failure to attract enough new workers into a particular occupation because of the appeal of that occupation. This has been a persistent problem in Nebraska's large long-haul trucking industry. Whether it's cultural changes, other factors, just seems like there's fewer young people that are interested in career in long haul trucking. It's a high skilled blue collar job, pays a higher wage than many jobs available to high school graduates, but is having more of a challenge attracting people, presumably due to the need to spend time away from home as a long haul trucker. There also can be a failure to attract new workers into an occupation because of education and training programs. We're not necessarily talking about a lack of available programs, but challenges in getting enough workers, getting enough young people into those programs and succeeding in those programs. So a lot of young people are interested in becoming software developers, but of course that's a very difficult field of study, and some students aren't able to make it through, often changing majors and so forth. And so any efforts we can make to help more students succeed as in software development, I think could be quite beneficial for our state economy. At the community college level, there's a great need in the economy for machinery mechanics. These are the people that install, maintain, and repair the machines and robots that are ever more prevalent on the factory floor. There's also a need for machinists who can work with that more sophisticated machinery. There are opportunities for education and training in those areas, certainly at community colleges throughout the state, but are we able to attract enough students into those programs who are a good match for the manufacturing industry? That's a challenge we face. Lastly, and I would say in those three key occupations I mentioned, software developers, machinery mechanics, machinists, it isn't just that some young people leave Nebraska. Even if that was not occurring, we're just not getting enough students to finish in these areas to meet the rapidly growing need for these types of workers. The last category, I guess, would be a failure to retain workers due to problems with net migration, obviously particularly net out migration. So if you look at nursing occupations, business and financial operations, we actually in Nebraska do have enough students studying in these areas each year and graduating in these areas each year to meet the needs of Nebraska business, but the issue is too many are leaving the state relative to those migrating in. So in that case, net migration is the issue rather than attracting enough people to education and training that they'll need for the occupation. So that was kind of a summary of our skills gap reports and the types of information we're finding. I guess Dillon and I are now ready to answer any questions you might have. Okay, and you do have a little bit more time to think about any questions you have. While you're thinking about that, I'll give you some contact information for Dillon and I in case you have additional questions you'd like to ask us offline, or just like to get a copy of the report or find out more about it. And so here's the contact information for myself and for Dillon. So please contact us if you would like additional information or have follow-up questions. If Dillon doesn't mind, I'll put in a plug for our next webinar in the Bureau of Business Research Fall Webinar Series, the Economic Impact of Businesses Supported by the Nebraska Innovation Act, which will be presented in 2 weeks' time. I'd also encourage you to follow the Bureau of Business Research and our various reports. I'll give you some information about that in a moment.
And I just wanted to mention as well, we do have a lot of publications, and we are able to do custom analyses if you have questions about a particular occupation or industry, and look for new analyses in our Trends magazine that we produce at the Department of Labor.
Okay. And if you'd like to connect with the Bureau of Business Research, here's our relevant addresses for following us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or to check out our website. Also, if you'd like to receive our monthly reports about the Nebraska economy and special reports, send your preferred email address to bbr@unl.edu, and we'll get you on our email list, and you'll be sent links to all the reports, which you can open or not open as your schedule permits. So, not seeing any questions. Would you like to add?
We do have 2 questions I see there.
Okay.
The first one looks like it says, did you look at the data on the trend of real wage, productivity, and the workers' mobility issue?
We do have some analysis of wages. We did a detailed analysis by occupation group of the current wages that workers needed, the current wages that the workers make, the minimum wage that they would like to receive in order to consider a new job. And Dillon talked about that issue earlier. And we analyzed whether, in which occupations was there a large gap between the wage people would need to receive to switch jobs and the wage they were currently earning. And we did find a handful of occupations in each region where there seemed to be a gap. We then correlated that with, were those occupations where wages were problematic? Were those the occupations where employers said it was especially difficult to hire, or that a lot of workers had unreasonable wage demands? And we didn't always find a large correlation. So at least for Nebraska-based workers, the Bureau of Business Research, our opinion was that it wasn't obvious that the wage level was a major source of the skills gap in a lot of occupations. That said, it could be an issue in terms of our interstate competition for workers.
And looks like another question came in. It is, what is the next steps to close the skills gap? I think one of the first steps is to promote this study and educate stakeholders on the information that we receive.
Yeah, and I would add to that, in a lot of ways, I think policy makers in Nebraska just need to keep on working what they're working on. I think we're working on the right things. We're making sustained efforts to improve the quality of life in the state, and other factors about our state's economy. And I think these things can help in terms of the competition for workers with other states. And we're making sustained efforts to offer training opportunities to workers in community colleges and colleges. I think one potential area where more could be done is by increasing state support of employers who are trying to put some of their workers through training programs. It can be quite expensive for employers to pay the tuition for their workers, to give workers time off to go to a college or community college for an additional course. But often that can be highly productive. A manufacturer, for example, can take a young person working for them who's a very good worker, who's interested in working in the manufacturing industry, and send them to a community college program to upgrade their skills. That's a great way to find workers that are going to be utilizing their skills throughout their career. However, it's quite expensive. If the state of Nebraska can shoulder some of those costs, share those with the employer, then I think we can produce more workers with the skills that all Nebraska employers can utilize into the future. So these are challenging problems, but I think working with employers and finding the right young people who have a good career history is a key step we can take. Another thing that could be critical is helping workers who've developed a poor employment history turn that around. What steps can be taken to help these workers when they recommit to their career, when they recommit to their job, prove that to employers to show that they'll be reliable to get along at work, and what are the pathways and strategies that young workers can follow to prove their worth to employers so that their skills, they can get hired and their skills can be utilized. That also would greatly benefit our skills gap in the state.
And it looks like we have one more follow-up question. Could you please speak on productivity and workers' mobility issue? Well, we do have some information in the labor availability reports on commuting satisfaction, and we found that workers are also in some portion of potential job seekers are also interested in being near public transportation, uh, but most workers, as you would expect, their satisfaction decreases with their commute the longer the commute gets. But this is based on region, and some regions have different results.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the surveys of households and businesses, I don't think have any way to directly measure the productivity of workers. So we don't have a lot of specific information on that topic. Mobility remains a challenge. Outmigration remains a challenge for Nebraska's economy. Um, Again, as I indicated earlier, I think that can best be resolved by improving the quality of life in our state. And I think also over time, Nebraska will do increasingly well with outmigration. There's a lot of evidence that young people tend to migrate to larger metropolitan areas as the Omaha economy continues to grow and Lincoln, some of the other metropolitan areas of the state continue to grow. I think our state should have more success in retaining a larger share of its young people after they graduate from their schooling.
It looks like that's all of the questions.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for participating in our webinar this afternoon.
Thank you.